gas in the car to get to work, because if they don't get to work and they're late or they miss a day, they're going to lose their job. How they're going to pay their electric bills. How they're going to have a little vacation maybe for the family. Maybe send their kids to college. Maybe go out to eat or catch a movie. That is the reality of tens of millions of families in this country. That's a reality that I understand. Now, the other reality that I know from an economics perspective, and sometimes our Republican friends forget about this, is that when George W. Bush left office 7.5 years ago, we were, yes, I know, we wish it would have been sooner, but, and you know, it's amazing to me how these Republicans can forget it. I guess we have to forgive them. They suffer from amnesia. That's we shouldn't laugh, it's a very serious problem. And they have forgotten the economy that they left us in, where we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, where we were running up a deficit of 1.4 trillion, the largest deficit in the history of this country. And oh, by the way, yes, the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. Well, we've come a long way in the last 7.5 years, and I know the Republicans worry that we're not creating enough jobs. It's only 250,000 jobs a month. Well, last I heard, creating 250,000 jobs a month, hell of a lot better than losing 800,000 jobs a month. But having said that, there's another truth that we have to recognize, is that in the last 30, 40 years, under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, the middle class of this country of ours, the great middle class, once the envy of the entire world, has been disappearing. And over that period of time, and accelerating more recently, we have seen grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality. Middle class shrinks, 47 million people living in poverty, and almost all new income and wealth going to the top 1%. Today, the simple truth is that if we are going to rebuild the American middle class, we have got to understand that we are living in a rigged economy. Now, the media, they don't talk about this for their reasons. But the fact is that for the last 30 or 40 years, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth. You know, Republicans get nervous when we talk about redistribution of wealth. But the truth is there has been a redistribution of wealth. The problem is it's gone in the wrong direction. We have seen the middle class shrink, and the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% see a doubling of the percentage of wealth they own in America today. Listen to this. Today, in terms of wealth, the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That's unbelievable. Today in America, the wealthiest 20 people now own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. Everybody here knows that in our country today, we got millions of people who are not working one job, right? They're working 2 jobs. My state people work 3 jobs, trying to bring together enough income and health care to take care of their families. You got mom out working, you got dad out working, you got kids out working. In fact, it turns out, I don't know if everybody knows this, that in America, our people work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. You all know that? The Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than do the people in Japan. And yet, at the end of all of that, everybody working, 58% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. So here's my first promise to you. If elected president, we are together going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. But let me also say this, and I say this every day. No president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do what has to be done for working families alone. Can't be done alone, and I'll tell you why it can't be done alone. Because the powers of Wall Street, corporate America, the wealthy campaign contributors, the corporate media are so great that no president can do it all by himself or herself. And that is what we need in this country, what you know more about than anybody else, is the need to build a grassroots national political movement, what I call a political revolution. And what this campaign has been about, and it's been doing it pretty well, you know, we've won 7 out of the last 8 caucuses and primaries. I don't know if some of you were with us just last night here in Philadelphia, but we had about 14,000 people out to a rally. And a lot of them are young people and working people who are determined that in this country, we are going to have a government that represents all of us, and not just wealthy campaign contributors. And that's what the political revolution is about. And in the middle of that revolution has got to be the trade union movement. And the reason for that is that I believe that the trade union movement historically, more than any other force in this country, has been responsible for creating the American middle class, and I thank you for that. I thank you for standing out on picket lines, occasionally getting arrested, but for saying that every worker in this country has the right to be treated with respect and dignity. And that is why I believe that we need to pass legislation, a modern-day EFCA, which says, which will make it easier, not harder, for working people to join unions. 50% plus one in a bargaining union signs the card, we've got a union. If, as is often the case, an employer refuses to negotiate a first contract, there will be severe penalties on that employer. I have, over a 25-year lifetime, a 98% pro AFL-CIO voting record. And I'm not sure that I was wrong on that 2%, by the way. I will not leave here this morning and go to a Wall Street fundraiser. I will not be hustling money from the wealthy and the powerful. I grew up, in a sense, in this movement. You are my family. And we will win or lose this campaign on the backs of working families. I have chosen not to create a super PAC, and I'm the only candidate who does not have a super PAC. Because I do not want or need the money from Wall Street or the drug companies or the other powerful special interests who already have so much influence over what goes on in Washington. What we have chosen to do, and it was a pretty risky choice, but it was the only choice for us, is to say, okay, we're going to raise our campaign funds, and sadly it costs, as you all know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to run for president. We're going to go out to working people in the middle class. And what has happened over the last 11 months since I've been in this campaign, we have received over 6 million individual campaign contributions, averaging $27 apiece. Now, when we talk about what's going on in this economy, you know and I know that millions of workers today are working for starvation wages. This campaign is listening to the working people of this country, and what they are telling me is they cannot make it on $8 an hour or $9 an hour or $10 an hour. And that is why together we are going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It is not a radical idea, not a great socialistic idea, to say that if somebody works 40 or 50 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. And we are going to make sure that women in this country do not continue earning 79 cents on the dollar. We're going to fight for pay equity. What this campaign is about is asking the American people to think outside of the box, not accept the status quo of where we are today as something that has to exist decade after decade. No, we don't have to have people sleeping out on the streets. No, we don't have to have veterans out on the streets because they don't have, that's right. So what this campaign is saying is that why is it that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, which is where we are right now, why are we the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people? Is this really a radical idea? I don't think so. Damn right it's not. All right? Germany can do it, and the UK can do it, and France can do it, and Holland can do it, and Scandinavia can do it. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border in Burlington, Vermont. They're doing it up in Canada. If every other major country on earth can do it, the United States of America can do it. Now, I am a member of the Health Education Labor Senate Committee. That committee helped write the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act has done a lot of very good things in this country. It has done away with this obscenity called pre-existing conditions. Total obscenity. We have added some 17 million people to the ranks of the insured. We have done away with discrimination against women in terms of the price they pay for their health insurance benefits. But let us be honest, because this country does not go forward unless we are honest and we look at the real issues. Despite the success of the ACA, and by the way, while I'm on that subject, count me in as somebody who will fight vigorously to end the so-called Cadillac tax. But today, despite the successes of the ACA, we got 29 million people who have no health insurance. We have even more who are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. And I was just talking to some of the folks in the CWA who are right now negotiating a contract with Verizon. And of course, as is the case in virtually every contract negotiation, you got a corporation that wants the American worker to pay more for his or her health care benefits and get less care. All right, so we've got a lot of people out there with high deductibles and co-payments, and we're getting ripped off every single day by the insurance companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for the medicine that we need. And that is why I believe that our eyes have got to be on the prize, and that the fight must continue for a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, hard for me to understand, and again, this requires thinking outside of the box and outside of the status quo. We get used to it. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. 30 or 40 years ago, we had the strongest infrastructure in the entire world. The best bridges, the best roads, the best rail system, the best wastewater plants, the best water systems, levees and dams. That's no longer the case. Because of inadequate funding, our infrastructure in many parts of this country is collapsing. My wife Jane and I were in Flint, Michigan 5-6 weeks ago, and what I heard and saw there, with children being poisoned by lead in the water, is something to make everybody in this room disgusted, that this is happening in the year 2016. But it's not just Flint, Michigan. We have got to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, and we will develop a $1 trillion 5-year plan which will create 13 million decent paying jobs. Now you tell me why in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we are the only major country not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today, Philadelphia, Burlington, Vermont, a woman is having a baby. And if that woman is working class or low income, there is a strong likelihood that in 2 or 3 weeks after giving birth, she will be forced to be separated from her baby, go to work to earn enough money to take care of her family. That is not what should be happening in America. And that is why I support 3 months paid family and medical leave. Now, as all of you know, over the last number of years, the Republican Party has tried in every way possible to either privatize or make cuts in Social Security. That's right. And I have to tell you that there are actually some Democrats who joined Republicans a few years ago in trying to cut Social Security. I'm proud to tell you that I helped form the Defending Social Security Caucus in the Senate, and they have not yet cut Social Security, and they're not going to cut Social Security. But here in Pennsylvania and in Vermont and all over this country, media doesn't talk about this at all. So the media can turn off their cameras because they're not going to report this anyhow. But we have millions of seniors and disabled vets trying to get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. Do the arithmetic yourself. You can't buy the health care, the prescription drugs, you can't keep your house warm on $11,000 or $12,000 a year. And then unbelievably, you got Republicans who want to cut Social Security today. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income. Now, this is one of the areas where Secretary Clinton and I have a disagreement. I have been very clear. We've introduced legislation. Here's the reality. Somebody makes $5 million a year. Somebody makes $118,000 a year. They're both paying the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you lift that cap, if you start at $250,000 and above, we can expand the lifetime of Social Security by 58 years. And we can improve benefits significantly for Social Security beneficiaries, and that is what I intend to do. It's another area of difference between Secretary Clinton and myself, and this is an issue that you know a whole lot about, because it has impacted many, many, many millions of Americans. When I came to the Congress in the early 1990s, it didn't take me a long time to figure out that the trade agreements being cooked up, in those days it was NAFTA, were going to be a disaster for working people. That these trade agreements were written by corporate America for one very clear purpose. Why do they want to pay workers in Pennsylvania 20, 25, 30 bucks an hour, a decent wage, a middle-class wage, when they could shut down here in Pennsylvania, shut down in Vermont, move to Mexico, move to China, move to other low-wage countries? That was their intention when they wrote those agreements, and that is, of course, exactly what has happened. NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and other trade agreements have cost this country millions of decent paying jobs, and also precipitated a race to the bottom where employers say, you don't want to take that wage cut? No problem, we're going to China. And that is why in new manufacturing jobs that we're seeing in America, workers are earning wages 50, 60, 70% of what older workers got doing the same jobs. That's the race to the bottom. Not only did I vote against all of these disastrous trade agreements, I helped lead the opposition to all of them. Now, the CWA is dealing with it today, where Verizon is trying to take call center jobs, as I understand it, to the Philippines. And that's what's gone on year after year after year. Shut down in America, move jobs abroad. The middle class of this country will not survive. So I say to corporate America, if I'm elected president, you know what? You're going to be investing in this country, not in China or the Philippines. When we talk about what goes on in this country, it's not only a rigged economy, it is also a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. And I ask everybody here again, please do not accept the status quo. Do not accept that you turn on the TV. Families. And when I talk to veterans, even I just met a guy who's well into his upper 90s, fought in World War II, you get chills down your spine knowing the sacrifices that they made and the sacrifices of families whose loved ones never came home. Fighting for our way of life, fighting for American democracy. But let us be very honest and clear about it. As a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, democracy in America is being undermined. We have a handful of billionaires, people like the Koch brothers and others. You all know the Koch brothers, right? Who are prepared to spend some $900 million in this campaign cycle alone to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. When you have a handful of families spending more money than either the Democratic or the Republican parties, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. We will not accept that. Now, I have been criticized for thinking too big, too radically. The idea that we can create 13 million jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure and paying for that by doing away with outrageous loopholes that allow corporations like Verizon and General Electric and others to stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and not pay in a given year a nickel in federal taxes. If it's called radical to try to do away with those loopholes so we can rebuild our infrastructure and create millions of jobs, you can call me a radical. What I have said during this campaign is that when we look at public education in America, it's not good enough just to look at first grade through 12th grade. The world has changed. The economy has changed. Young people need more education. And that is why I believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. Just talked to a union man a little while ago, and he said right near here in Pennsylvania, there are hundreds of good-paying welding jobs available, and yet the company can't find qualified welders. And that's true in many areas. We need to make sure that our kids have the training to do those good type jobs so they can earn living wages for their families. They need the training and the education to do that. And I've been called radical for saying that we will pay to make higher education at public colleges and universities free, tuition free, by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. Well, everybody here remembers that 8 years ago, you helped bail out Wall Street after their greed and illegal behavior nearly destroyed this economy. I feel very comfortable about saying to them, Now it is their time to help the working families of this country. I don't have to tell anybody in this room, because you know it better than anybody in America, that's what trade unions know, is that real change in this country never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. Nobody ever gave workers the permission to form a union. Not today, not historically. Workers had to fight to form unions to make sure that people in the unions had dignity and security on the job. That's place. That's how the women's movement developed. On up. And today we are in a pivotal moment in American history, where as Americans we have to take a very hard look at the status quo in our country. We have to ask ourselves whether it is acceptable that so few have so much and so many have so little. Whether it is acceptable that a handful of billionaires can exert unbelievable influence over the political and legislative process. Whether it is acceptable that the middle class continues to disappear and almost all new income and wealth goes to the 1%. Whether it's acceptable that we are the only major country on earth that does not provide health care or paid family and medical leave to all. Whether it is acceptable that hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people are unable to get the education that they need, or whether we are not dealing effectively or not with the crisis of climate change. Whether we are not dealing effectively with a criminal justice system which is broken and has more people in jail than any other country on earth. Those are some of the issues that are out there. And what I am perceiving is that all over this country, and I've been in California and I've been in Maine and a lot of states in between, the American people are saying no. That is not acceptable. That is not what this country should be about. And what people are saying is it is too late for establishment politics. It is too late for establishment economics. That we need to bring millions of people together, and in my view, the trade union movement is right in the middle of that struggle. To stand up and say to the billionaire class, sorry, you are not going to have it all. Sorry, we are not going to allow your greed to continue to destroy the working families of this country. Now let me end my remarks on a note of real optimism. What happens when people stand up and fight back? If we were here in this room 5 years ago, somebody jumps up and says, Bernie, I think this $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a starvation wage. I think we have to raise that minimum wage 5 years ago to $15 an hour. What the person next to him would have said is, $15 an hour? You want to more than double the minimum wage? You're nuts. You got to be more conservative. You got to be more realistic. Don't be so radical. But then what happened because of the efforts of the trade union movement? Thank you very much. Workers in the fast food industry, they went out on strike. People at McDonald's and at Burger King and at Wendy's, they said to the community, we can't live on $7.25 an hour. We want and need $15 an hour. And then you know what happened? The communities around this country heard them and said, you're right. And then in Seattle, a couple of years ago, $15 an hour. Los Angeles, $15. San Francisco, $15. In the last month alone, Oregon, California, New York State, $15 an hour. This happened. This idea, which 5 years ago would have been thought to be radical and unthinkable, is happening today because people stood up and fought for it. So don't tell me that we cannot transform this country, that we can't create good-paying jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure, that we can't have paid family and medical leave and health care for all like every other major country on earth. Please don't tell me that, because it's not true. It can happen if we are prepared to stand up together, not let the Donald Trumps of the world divide us up. And when we stand together, and when we have a vision which says that we have a government that works for all of us, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.
Much that I can say to follow what said. You know, we live in a country where the media talks about a lot of stuff, but often not the most important issues facing working families, that we don't have the kinds of discussion that we should. But Ed just said, I think, everything that has to be said. And that is the question that we have got to ask ourselves is, how does it happen that in this country over the last 30, 40 years we have seen the decline of the middle class, which has once been the envy of the entire world? Why is it that people are working longer hours for lower wages? Why do we have 47 million people living in poverty? Why is it that 58% of all new income generated today, 58% is going to the top 1%? Why is it that over the last many years we have lost millions and millions of good-paying middle-class jobs as corporations shut down in Pennsylvania and in the United States of America and moved to low-wage countries abroad? What this campaign is about, and I thank Ed and all of the people behind me for their support, is to create a government which stands up for working people and not just the 1%. Let me give you one example. Right now, the CWA, Ed's union, is in very bitter negotiations with Verizon. Verizon wants to take American jobs, call center jobs, out of this country and bring them abroad where people will be paid pennies an hour. That is unacceptable. That is part of the long-term greed that we are seeing on the part of corporate America. And I say to Verizon, you know what, do the right thing. Why don't you hire and why don't you retain people right here in the United States of America? Why don't you pay them decent wages rather than ship good-paying jobs abroad? And I would also point out, when we talk about corporate greed, from 2008 to 2013, this very same Verizon Corporation made over $42 billion in combined profits. But because of tax loopholes, not only did Verizon pay nothing in federal income taxes, it actually received a tax rebate of $732 million from the IRS. It actually got money back from the federal government, and over that period of time, 2008 to 2013, did not pay a nickel in taxes. So after ripping off the taxpayers of this country, then they go to the workers here on the East Coast, and they say, no, we're not going to keep you on call center jobs, we're going to send your jobs abroad. As I have been saying throughout this campaign, and I think millions of people are saying it with me, enough is enough. We're going to have to deal with this corporate greed. We're more concerned about compensation packages
for their CEOs than they are about the needs of hardworking people who want nothing more than to be able to live in dignity and security and bring their kids up in a decent way. Over the last 30 years, one of the major reasons why the middle class has been disappearing is because of disastrous trade policy. And so on that issue, Secretary Clinton and I have very strong differences of opinion. Not only did I oppose NAFTA, I was out on the picket lines with trade unionists in opposition to an agreement that I knew would be a disaster for American workers. I strongly opposed permanent normal trade relations with China and virtually every other trade agreement, the results of which these trade agreements have cost the workers in this country millions and millions of decent paying jobs, and on top of that have led to a race to the bottom. And that is that workers are threatened with either seeing their jobs go abroad or take cuts in their health care benefits or their wages. Secretary Clinton has supported virtually every one of these trade agreements. I have opposed them. And then just recently, as all of you know, we have the Panamanian Free Trade Agreement, and there's been a lot of discussion on that in the last few days. And what the Panamanian Free Trade Agreement did is enable large corporations and the wealthiest people, not just in this country, but around the world, to participate in massive tax avoidance schemes. As a result of the release of the so-called Panama Papers, we now know that more than 214,000 entities throughout the world have been using a law firm in Panama to avoid paying taxes. I was on the floor of the United States Senate in opposition to the Panama Free Trade Agreement for precisely that reason. Panama is a very, very tiny country. Very hard to argue that they will have in the trade agreement any major impact on jobs in the United States. Very hard to make that argument. But what I was concerned about then, and what turned out to be true, is that that trade agreement will give large corporations in this country, and in fact corporations around the world, a capability of avoiding paying taxes to their own governments. So let me conclude. If there is one theme that is running throughout our campaign, is that we have got to create an economy that works for all of our people, not just the 1%. That means raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It means pay equity for women workers. It means rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, that's our water systems, our wastewater plants, roads, bridges, creating 13 million decent paying jobs. It means fundamental changes in our trade policies so that Verizon and other corporations are not throwing American workers out on the street and moving abroad. On those issues, Secretary Clinton and I, over the years, have had very, very strong disagreements. And I think history and the reality of today prove that my position, the position of these people behind me, the position of the trade union movement, has been the right position. So.
Senator, one of your remarks last night, you suggested that Hillary Clinton asserted that you were qualified for the office of president. It's our reporting that the campaign put out that they wanted to disqualify in the run-up to New York, which is not quite the same thing.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to answer that. But what I would like to do, rather than getting into the usual campaign gossip, I'd like to talk about why the middle class is in decline.
Okay, so can I ask you
Sure.
an AFL-CIO question?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The AFL-CIO has essentially been the same Pennsylvania decided to remain neutral right now, given the fact that you have such an extensive record on the stump of opposing trade agreements that you say hurt American workers. Why do you think that is?
These guys still with me.
Well, what do you think?
I think we have the rank and file, no question. That if you look at polling, I think if you look at some of the exit polls, after people vote. We have the support of the rank and file of the trade union movement. We have the support of a number of very great unions out here. We have the American Postal Workers Union, we have the CWA, UAW, ASME. Well, I think, that's politics. Secretary Clinton has and her team have, put a lot of pressure on leadership. But we're very proud to have the support of millions of trade unionists in this country. Anybody really want to ask me about a question of importance to the American working people? Thank you very much. Any questions on the needs of the middle class of America before we get to political gossip? All right, now where's your political gossip? Okay, what do you got? That's it.
What you said last night struck a lot of people because you usually say that you respect the average period, so why are you now
because the Washington Post had a headline which said, quote, Clinton questions whether Sanders is qualified to be president, end of quote. That was what was thrown at me. Now, the other thing is that I believe the Clinton campaign told CNN, and I quote, that their strategy as we go into New York and Pennsylvania, I guess, is, quote, disqualify him, defeat him, and unify the party later. Now, as I have said a million times, I have desired and I have run an issue-oriented campaign. Now, it's hard because we can see the media is not particularly interested about why the middle class declines, about wage and income disparity. That's not what you're interested in. But we have tried in rally after rally, and many of you have been there, to talk about the most important issues facing the American people. But if Secretary Clinton thinks, because I'm from a small state in Vermont, and we're going to come here to New York and go here to Pennsylvania, and they beat us up and they're going to go after us in some kind of really uncalled for way, then we're not going to fight back, but we got another, they can guess again, because that's not the case. This campaign will fight back. So when you have headlines from the Washington Post, quote, Clinton questions whether Sanders is qualified to be president, my response is, well, if you want to question my qualifications, let me suggest this. That maybe the American people might wonder about your qualifications, Madam Secretary, when you voted for the war in Iraq, the most disastrous foreign policy blunder in the modern history of America. People might want to wonder about your qualifications when you supported virtually every trade agreement. Trade agreements which have cost the American worker millions of decent paying jobs. And the American people might not wonder about your qualifications when you're spending an enormous amount of time raising money for your super PAC from some of the wealthiest people in this country and from the most outrageous special interests. I don't think I have to explain to the American people what Wall Street did to this economy, and yet in her last filing report for her major super PAC, one of several, she raised $15 million from Wall Street. Are you qualified to be president of the United States when you're raising millions of dollars from Wall Street, an entity whose greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior to help destroy our economy. So look, let me be clear, this is not the type of politics that I want to get in. I know it's what the media loves. It is not the type of politics that I want to get in. But let me also be very clear. If Secretary Clinton thinks that I just come from the small state of Vermont, we're not used to this, well, we will get used to it fast. I'm not going to get beaten up. I'm not going to get lied about. We will fight back. But I do hope that we can raise the level, and I do hope that now and then the media will choose to talk about real issues. You got a real issue, Nancy? What do you got?
Just to clarify, if you think she's not qualified, does that mean?
No, what I am saying, did you hear what I just said is that she has attacked me for being unqualified. And if I am going to be attacked for being unqualified, I will respond in quiet. So I would hope that we can get away from this. I do have respect for Secretary Clinton. I don't know who in her campaign comes up with these brilliant ideas. But all that I'm saying is I am not going to go into New York. You know, I know that they are getting nervous. They've lost 7 out of the last 8 caucuses and primaries, and I know every day they develop a new approach to the campaign. I gather their approach is again, this is a quote from CNN. Quote, disqualify him, defeat him, and unify the party later. That sounds to me like they're ready to run a very negative campaign. That is not what I want to do. I don't want to do that. But if we are going to be attacked, and my qualifications for president after being in the Congress for 25 years, supporting working people throughout my entire career, standing up to virtually every special interest in this country, they're going to question my qualifications. I think I have a right to question this. Thank you all very, very much. And guys, thank you very much for the fight.